We're going to keep the conversation going as we do this time every week with Kevin Minnick of NJ Advanced Media. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Sully. How are you today?
Pretty good, man. What's happening?
You all right? You recovered from last night? You're in good shape now?
Ah, yeah. I was actually up till about 1 in the morning. Couldn't get to sleep. By the time you finally get done all the typing and all that stuff, it's 11:30, and it's Friday night. You just gotta deal with it.
I hear you.
So wanted to piggyback on obviously the topic we've been talking about all morning is the social media stuff with St. Joe football. What was your take on it? We just heard from Mike McGarry. We had Scott Goodale, wrestling coach over at Rutgers, on early this morning with a great interview and kind of getting a college perspective on social media and how high school kids should act, what the ramifications are. What was your initial impression when you heard this story come out?
It's a tough situation, obviously for St. Joe, and and to what Mike said, I really think that the boys will be boys mentality, kids will be kids mentality, just doesn't hold water anymore. And while no one will confirm, officially confirm the fact that what everybody's saying, that this was just a go between two friends, two kids that have known each other for a while, that there was nothing to it. That's only the surface, and you really have to go and look at what lies beneath, and the fact that to a lot of people, what was on that video is offensive, and you simply cannot do that nowadays. You just can't do it. As meaningless as it may have seemed to those kids, it offends a lot of people. And, I agree that St. Joe had to do something about it. And I agree with what they did. They were swift to judgment, but they made sure that they did the proper investigation and got all the facts, before coming to their punishment. And, it's a shame that Coach Sacco is, catching, it gets the 2-game suspension, but, a punishment had to be delivered. And ultimately, I really think, it's sad, but ultimately, given the situation, there's some responsibility in there, and that, someone had to, I guess, almost quote unquote pay the price for it. But it just goes to show once again, and that you just simply cannot do those things. And I think a lot of parents and a lot of people that you hear from experts and a lot of people that are deeply involved in social media, that even when it comes to texting, and I tell the same thing to my kids, what you text and what you post, is that something that you are willing and have no problem with your parents reading or hearing? And I think that in this particular case, that just doesn't hold water. The video, it depends on how many who has seen it, but you just bottom line is you just can't do it. And ultimately, somebody's going to have to pay the price for this, and those involved with it are going to have to do that.
Kevin, I think one of the big disconnects here is that the high school kids just don't really understand that the slang they use amongst one another can be viewed as offensive by adults, and maybe there's a little disconnect there, and they don't really see what they say on a near constant basis amongst themselves, amongst their buddies, that kind of thing, that it really isn't appropriate for anything other than between themselves.
Yeah, like you said, I think the bottom line, and Mike said it as well, is that these kids just didn't think. And, a lot of kids just don't think about the circumstances that can involve from their actions, when they're doing this. They're just not thinking that, okay, this could bother somebody. They think it's just it's just a couple of kids going back and forth, and and for them having fun and trash talking, and it's no big deal. But, in this day and age, it is a big deal. And there are people out there, excuse me, who are offended by it, and there are some people that, they don't really care about it. But, like going back to it again, they just didn't think, and the ramifications of their actions are what we're seeing now. So, it's a lesson to be learned, and you hope that people keep driving this home to and it's really to kids more than it is to anything else, that this stuff doesn't go away, and it's out there, and you can get a hold of it, and once that happens, who knows what's next. So you really have to, you got to watch what you're doing is the bottom line. And if that's the way you're going to be, okay, well, you know what? Circumstances like this may happen, and you're going to have to be willing to pay the price. And obviously that's what's happening down at St. Joe.
Kevin, I think Mike McGarry made a great point that if you do play for a high-level program like a St. Joe football, like an Atlantic City basketball, Ocean City field hockey, Eastern field hockey, some of these really high-profile programs in South Jersey, you're going to be held to a higher standard, whether you like it or not. And that's something that really probably that's the biggest lesson for these kids is like, hey, when you wear that Wildcat emblem on your helmet, there's a certain way you need to conduct yourself.
Yeah, and I think when you play for really any high school team, and I think a lot of athletic directors and administrators make the point, whether you like it or not, you are going to be held to a higher standard. It's just the nature of it. It's just what's going to happen, and you have to be prepared, and you have to be willing to understand that the circumstances are going to be a little bit different. And the fact of the matter that, these are kids and they're high school kids, and kids do stupid things. I get that. But at the same time, you really have to zone in, realize the situation that you're in, and don't put yourself in a spot where your back's going to be against the wall when you do something like this. I think if some, like Mike said, there's 40, 45 football games, and this is not the only time that, two teams kind of went back and forth. It happens all the time. It happens all the time, and it has happened all the time for years and years and years. But you just have to tactfully do it a different way. And if you want to trash talk, then that's fine. But, when you start getting into, the racial things and things that, are really disturbing to a lot of people, you've probably crossed the line. And, obviously when that happens, punishment's going to have to be delivered. I think, St. Joe, when you look at the statement that came from the Haddonfield superintendent in this particular situation, his reaction was, we're going to let St. Joe handle the situation, and they did. And, you have to give credit to St. Joe for not sweeping it under the rug, for dealing out swift punishment. And basically, if these kids and people don't understand the magnitude of this, well, you know what? Take a look at the punishment, take a look at what has happened, and hopefully you learn from it, and it doesn't happen again.
Talking with Kevin Minnick of NJ Advanced Media. And Kevin, let's get back to the football field. We're pretty much a little bit past the halfway point. We're getting to that point of starting to look and see who can be playoff contenders. Give me some of your impressions of this weekend. Got some teams really on a pretty good roll, teams like Camden and Williamstown. St. Augustine, you were out there last night. Great win for them over Holy Spirit. So we're starting to see sort of the cream rise to the top a little bit.
Yeah, it's really strange that it's kind of this early in the fall, yet we are 2 weeks away or so from the start of playoffs. And, some teams have already played 7 games. So, like you said, I think that we're now seeing where teams kind of fall in the pecking order of things in South Jersey football. And you mentioned Williamstown, you mentioned Camden, right there, two undefeated. Williamstown undefeated, Camden with one loss to a defending state champion from Maryland. Two teams that are playing extremely well, and they're scoring points and winning games big, but they're really making an impact defensively. Williamstown's played 7 games and has given up 28 points.
Wow.
The only team going into this weekend in the state that had given up fewer points was Gateway. They had only given up 21, but they had played only 4 games. So you look at Williamstown, 7 games now, 28 points, and an explosive offense to boot. So, like we've talked about before, I think Williamstown was a team that I had looked at. I wanted to see, they kind of had to prove something to me, for me to kind of believe in them, I think. And, they've certainly done that in my eyes. I think they're a team that is more than capable of taking that Group 5, that South Jersey Group 5 championship this year. And, they've got a couple tough games still ahead of them. They're going to play St. Augustine in 2 weeks. They've got Shawnee next week, a team that, even though has not produced the W's that they have in the past, is still a pretty tough and talented team. So, we'll see how they do in these next 2 games. But, I like Williamstown. And with Camden's playing tremendous defense as well. I think Camden's got one of the best defensive players in the state in Tyreek Austin Cave, a junior linebacker who just, is all over the field and getting things done for them. So, like we said, I think the better teams and the teams, are now separating themselves a little bit. And, we're at a point now where the next 2.5 weeks, 2-3 weeks, we're going to find out exactly where everybody stands.
Kevin, have you figured out the Born Power Index yet?
You know what? I've got opinions on that I'd rather not say, but I think the fact that no one knows what the Born Power Index is a huge mistake. I think if you're going to factor something into your playoff system to determine where teams are going to fall and where they're going to rank, that people should know what it is, and no one knows what the Born Index is except for one person, maybe 2. So that's a strange animal in its own. But NJ Advanced Media, we've got a system that plug in the information and it'll kick it out. So once everything is all said and done, we'll know what's going on. But as far as the process is concerned, you pretty much know the same as me.
Good stuff as always, Kevin. We're up against break. Got to let you go, but we appreciate the time each and every week. We'll try to figure out a little bit more next week and see what's what.
All right, we'll have a little clearer playoff picture, I'm sure, by next weekend.
Great stuff. Appreciate it, Kevin.
All right, Sully, have a good day.
You too, man.